Yo, 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 what is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN. Today, we got a couple big things. Number one, we are going to talk about KvK matchmaking for CallofDragons and address some of the obstacles, hurdles, along with providing some solutions and read some feedback and comments from the community. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up, because it helps a lot. Thanks. Second piece here is an announcement, or I guess two really. First is that we are going to be live streaming tonight on September 4th and tomorrow on Friday, September 5th at around 6 p.m. Eastern, 22 UTC. Tonight's stream is going to be for updating all of the active status and above kingdoms in the KvK kingdom pool so we can get some updated stats ahead of the group announcements that are going to be happening tomorrow on September 5th. So if you're watching this video around that time and you want to come and tune in, we also are finally going to be having some background music. So I'm pretty excited. I finally looked into this. So we're going to have some nice background music going on while we're live streaming. So yeah, hopefully it ends up being a really good time. With all that being said, let's dive right in. So, okay, KvK matchmaking. To me, this is starting to become a little bit more of a consistent worry. There are a number of pieces of feedback that I'm going to read to you, but the short version is that there are challenges when you basically have kingdoms that are inflated and or they're getting placed into groups where they shouldn't be. And that probably is really the crux of it, but I'm going to explain what I mean as we go through the video. And then, like I said, we'll provide some solutions here at the end. But let's get into a couple comments here. Firstly, this is one from Dancing Haze saying, well, the only problem is the matchmaking. Some are not balanced enough, which again, that has been true. And the opposite has been true as well. That's why some of the KvKs didn't have fights at Dragon Zone. That part is true for some of them. Things work out well, but it's the matter of how alliances stay inside of Zone 1 to farm instead of fighting. And then mentioning 70, 19, 28. So this goes into the idea of shedding, of leaning out your kingdom. And at the same time, if there is no way for you to do that in a quick fashion, which we know there really isn't, right? Because you'd have to, again, if for those of you that remember, I did this interview with Blood Reyna from Kingdom 110. Doomstar's the king over there. And I remember interviewing Reyna, and she was telling me that we basically talked about kind of their first phase, which basically took a season's worth of time, right, give or take, to get players to assist and help players in moving off of the kingdom. And even though she mentioned that they did a really good job and they were able to facilitate a good number of people to transfer off, they still weren't by any means done. And it just goes to show you that every kingdom cares about the next KvK. Right? The most important thing is the next KvK, and it always will be. Now, yes, you could still have some long-term, long plans for down the road that you're working on throughout each KvK. But the most important thing is always going to be how lean, how non-fatty can we be going into the next KvK? Right? How much can we trim? And that's really at the center of one of the biggest problems right now in probably any kingdom builder for KvK matchmaking. And I do believe that there are some solutions. Let's get to the next comment. So this is from AC Zarbaugh says, I don't think they will put BTX and Echo 3 KvKs in a row, especially after BTX just cut a little chunk of dead weight. They will try to balance the KvKs the best they can instead of making a superpower KvK with all the top kingdoms in the same KvK. Now, there is a big difference between dead weight and people that just either didn't have enough time to show up or they could have been active, but they chose not to. And what I mean more so, now you might still consider that to be dead weight, but what I really mean more by dead weight is people that they're just not playing that much, right? It's not that they couldn't show up, they just didn't have enough time to maybe show up, right? And I'm talking about people that just truly don't are just not active anymore. They're not motivated anymore. Maybe they were last season, but they're not this season, right? Now, again, you might still consider those to be the same, and you can still put them in a dead weight category. I just have a little bit of a different definition on what I would consider to be kind of like pure dead weight, and like, okay, these people just need to be trimmed because they're just not contributing, which I guess more or less is the same definition. But I guess I just wanted to highlight some differences maybe within. That's probably what I should have said, within the dead weight umbrella. There, it's probably a more appropriate way to put it. So this kind of goes into one of those things. Like, one of the things that we saw with the BTX and Echo KvK this last season for War of the Last Snows, right? Which is why it was, one of probably the most disappointing number one KvKs that we've seen in a while, is because it felt like, and again, this is from community reactions, from what I had seen as well from some of the KvK footage I watched, is that BTX just didn't put up as much of a fight as people thought they were going to put up based on their numbers and what the prediction was. And that's okay. Or it's not to say like, oh, shame on them, right? We can never anticipate any kind of internal workings that are happening. But if, for example, BTX was able to bring, a select amount of people in, that probably would have helped out a lot, and also would have helped them getting placed into a more appropriate KvK group at that point, instead of accounting for their entire kingdom power, right? Obviously minus the 15 mil, which we ended up getting a recent update on. Okay, next one. So this is from Miniazuki, but the broke as F, Abood probably sounds better. If devs make more effort on matchmaking, they won't lose players and many kingdoms will be alive. Now, this is such a massive point and comment here, because it really speaks to the challenges on what bad matchmaking will result in. And that is in players not being satisfied with the matchup, number one. Number two, if they're not satisfied with the matchup and they don't feel that they can win, that they can compete against whoever they get matched up next to, whether that's in zone 2, zone 3, or the final zone, that demotivates people. That can demotivate your player base, that can demotivate your management team and your kingdom as a whole. And it doesn't mean that it's going to apply to every single player, but it will seep in. And that is the kind of mood killer and KvK killers that can ruin, I guess your KvK. Essentially, I was going to say your matchmaking, but your KvK. And that also reduces the amount of money spent on the game that players are willing to do. If they don't feel that they have just as much of an equal chance to win, to compete against other kingdoms, you're going to have a number of people that will just be deflated, right? They will lose engagement. It's just it's a psychological fact. So it doesn't mean that they may still not go out there and participate. Some of them might not go out there and compete because they probably want to gain merits, etc., right? There will be a number of people, but you're not going to be able to reach the potential of what a kingdom could perform at if you don't do things like this. So I think this is a fantastic point that this person brings up. The next one here for me is going to be from the same person. Says, I think over 40, some D alliances are good, but sadly the matchmaking kills them. Now, this speaks to a previous comment and what we talked about with having some kingdoms that are inflated, right? Where, for example, or maybe defloat, right? Maybe they're super lean. Like maybe some of the D alliances or D kingdoms are good, but they have some dead weight, and maybe they're getting matched up against either stronger kingdoms that have leaned out, or they're getting matched up against kingdoms that are fatty as well, but they're already stronger at that point. So you can kind of get some of the in these cases both, because like let's say you have multiple CD kingdoms, but they all have some amount of fat on them, but again, some are around the same power. And you still have some of these really good D kingdoms that are maybe, again, on the rise. They're getting some migrations that are coming in. They get paired, and the matchmaking just isn't favorable, right? Because it's unbalanced. It's not as clean as it should be. And you end up having a situation where the kingdom goes into that KvK and they come out broken, or not having as much momentum going into the next season. And as we all know, you need to have good recruitment seasons in between KvKs. And again, now you can do it during as well. But most of the time, people will probably migrate near the end of a KvK and then and or in between, right? So for something like this, it is literally it's one of the most important aspects of the game that you need to be cognizant of and aware of on how something like whether you're a D or C trying to come up or even a B and you're trying to kind of get yourself to an A, or even if you're just trying to work yourself up to like just being on the cusp prior to a full status, right, where you're crowded. These are things that are really important to you. And depending on how the KvK goes can impact whether or not you get, 50, 100 new people, or maybe one person, or maybe no one comes. So all of these things are really connected. Okay, next one is from Kelly. Says they need to shorten matchmaking phase and increase 1 to 2 days between registration instead. This I actually would be somewhat, like, I understand what they're saying. Personally, I don't think that KvK matchmaking needs the last 5 days. I'm actually somewhat okay if they wanted to maybe extend registration to like 3 days as an example, but I do think that the timeline period can be shorter. I don't think you need 5 days. I think you maybe need 2 days at most for matchmaking. Heck, I'd be okay with 24 hours for matchmaking. And if you wanted to shorten that by 4 days and add 1 more day to registration, right? We're still saving 4 days overall. I'm okay with something like that. I just don't understand why you need 5 days for matchmaking. I don't. I mean, again, you could figure all this out in a day if you just had someone sit down there and figure out the matchups, right, et cetera, especially with all the data that they have. I can only imagine. And I would then have to, I would hope, and I'd like to believe that they have some kind of AI that is maybe sorting through everything and maybe giving them predicted matchups. And then maybe they're just kind of taking some and saying, okay, you here, you down there, right? And doing some maybe slight adjustments at that point. But I definitely agree with this for the most part. And then this one, which is a little concerning, but it does hammer home a point, which is Ragesh says, not even readjust. We going to G3 if matchmaking fails. And this is absolutely something you don't want to have happen. Everyone knows that the G2 pool is the biggest kingdom pool right now in the KvK cycle, right? There's 3 rotations, G1, G2, G3. G2 is the one that's in pre-war right now and that is going into the next KvK, right? We showed you here that there's 321 total kingdoms here. Out of those, 210 registered for ROTD and 39 registered for COC, right? That's 249 kingdoms registered out of 321, right? Which is almost 78% of the kingdoms that registered. Now, obviously, you want that to try and be at 100%. But if you end up having more kingdoms that can register, that leave the G2 pool, first and foremost, I don't think anyone should really leave the G2 pool in for what I would recommend. But one of the things is that let's say you leave the G2 pool and you end up going over to the G3 pool, right? Or the G1 pool. Because the pools are smaller, if you are a stronger kingdom or an A, B seeded kingdom as an example, maybe even some high Cs, but most likely an A or B, you are probably going to have an easier time. Some may call it a free win. Some may call it a Diplo win. Some may call it, just an easier time. I think that's probably the most PG way to put it. Now, again, some people may consider doing it because they might be too inflated for their power. And this is where we need to start looking at addressing solutions. So here's my solution to something like this. And this is something that other people have stated as well, but I just think that it's pretty obvious at this point. One of the biggest problems right now is, as an example, I'm in this KvK, right? Let's say, or here, let me give you a better example. Let's go to pre-war. Let me go to kingdom, I don't know. Here, let's just go to 110. I'll use them as an example. Let's go to 110, right? Let's look at their who's ever at Dragon, right? Okay, so ROV's at Dragon. Let's see where's their power. Dun, dun, dun. Let me get a flag over here. Bump, bump. Okay, so let me open this up. Right. Okay, so their alliance is 22.25 billion power. However, there is no way of knowing how much dead weight they still currently have. So all of this is to say that when you are unsure about any final numbers, or let's just say true fighting numbers for a kingdom, you can run into challenges. And this could be for any kingdom for that matter. And so how do you potentially solve this? Well, what you would do is you would say, as one example is you say, okay, well, let's allow the kingdom to register as the king or queen, to register the players that they want to bring in to that upcoming KvK. And if you are not on the approved list, then you can't go to the KvK. And what this means is that it would register the power for the kingdom based on the players that the king or queen has chosen. Option one. Option two, and I think this is probably a little bit easier of one, is where you register alliances. So as an example, if I'm in 110, and let's say, well, we only want to bring 3 or 4 alliances in, or maybe just the ones that are in the final zone, but not anymore, right? So I would say, okay, well, I select ROV, I would select ROA, I would select ROS, and ROK, and then maybe ROG, right? So these 4 or 5. And then what you would do is the system would say, okay, well, any players that are in those alliances at the time that registration ends are able to go into the KvK. So what this allows for the kingdom management teams to do is to select which accounts they want to bring into the KvK, which is also less of a workload because now you just have to go through the member list in each of the alliances and then just kick out whoever you don't want in the alliance that you're planning to bring into the KvK. Given the amount of shells that we have, again, that is a thing. It would be nice if that wasn't a thing. We'll maybe talk about that later. But this, to me, I think would probably be the easiest way to do it. Now, whether or not you think this should be a permanent change or not, I at least think it should be something that we should test out for a season. I think that is worthy enough. I think it's important enough to say, well, look, we're going to try this system out for one season. Let's see how it works. And then let's collect feedback on it from the community. And did it work out better in matchmaking and in group pairings? Because part of me thinks that it really would. Now, yeah, I'm sure there's some pros and cons here that you can find, like, what happens if, a kingdom, barely registers anyone and, they go into, like fighting against C and D seeds or something like that if they're a top kingdom. To be fair, if they did, we would call them out on that. And also at the same time, I just don't know if we really would see people do that. And I'm talking about a large amount. Sure, you can have the one-offs here and there where something like that maybe could happen, but keep in mind the system is still going to pair you based on basically lean weight instead of your entire weight, right? So regardless if you were to register at a lower power, they would still try to pair you appropriately. But this is then where you start getting into things like, well, with the dead kingdoms and the deadish low activity kingdoms that they're going to start merging, you will start solving some of these potential cons or challenges or hurdles when you start raising the bottom up. So again, these are my thoughts on what I think would be a way to test this. I would love to hear from you. Is there another idea out there? Is there another approach you have on being able to address this, on how you would improve KvK matchmaking? Like I said, this is just 1-2 ideas and ones that I think really could work, even if you tested it out for a season and then you see how it played out within the community. But we'll see. I do think, however, that they do need to do something. And I just don't think that, yes, they've given us tools to lean, but the problem is that in a lot of kingdoms, unless you're doing a rebuild and you're just taking only lean weight with you, most kingdoms are having to make efforts, some more difficult than others, to lean the weight out themselves internally within the kingdom. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. That's it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.